helicopter drops hard against a gust off the water, and Jasmine Carter grips the armrest as the island tilts into view through the window. Whitecaps. A private marina lined with yachts that look like they were never meant to actually leave the dock. And below them, a stretch of green lawn where dozens of people in matching black
house.
uniforms are already moving into formation,
compound.
like they heard the rotors before she did. "That's a lot of staff for a summer house," she says. Seo Kangmin doesn't answer right away. He's looking down at the same lawn, and something in his jaw has gone tight in a way she hasn't seen before. Not since the night they met. Not since before any of this started feeling easy. "It's not a house," he says. "It's the family compound." The skids touch down. The rotor wash flattens the grass in a wide circle, and through it, Jasmine watches the staff lines snap straight, every head dipping at once like a wave moving down a beach. She's seen Kangmin get recognized before a maitre d' who comped their dessert, a stranger on the street who asked for a photo. This is different. This is 50 people bowing to a door before it's even open. He steps out first and reaches back for her hand. The wind catches her hair, and for 1 second, stepping down onto the tarmac, she lets herself think this might still be what she signed up for. A summer with her boyfriend. Sun, water, his family finally getting to meet her. Then she sees the man standing at the front of the receiving line. He's older, silver at the temples, dressed simply compared to the suits flanking him, which somehow makes him look more powerful, not less. He doesn't bow, he doesn't smile. He looks at Kangmin for a long moment, and then his eyes shift to Jasmine, and they stay there. "Kangmin," his voice carries without him raising it. "Who is this?" Kangmin's hand tightens around hers. "Grandfather, this is. I can see who she is standing next to." The old man takes a step forward, and the entire line of staff seems to lean with him, like he's pulling gravity along. "What I am asking is why you brought a stranger here. Now, this week." The wind dies down just enough that Jasmine hears someone behind her inhale sharply. She doesn't turn to look. She's too busy watching 40-some faces very deliberately not look at her, the way people avoid looking at a car accident they already know is bad. "She's not a stranger," Kangmin says. "She's the woman I love." A few feet to the old man's left, a woman in a cream-colored suit makes a small sound that isn't quite a laugh. Jasmine will learn her name later, Aunt Miran. But right now she's just a stranger with perfect posture and an expression like she's been handed exactly the opening she wanted. The chairman doesn't look at his daughter. He keeps his eyes on Jasmine the way you'd study a number on a contract you didn't expect to see. "You picked a strange week to fall in love," he says, and turns, walking back toward the compound without waiting for a response, the staff lines folding shut behind him like a door. Nobody moves for a second. Then a younger man, 20s, easy posture, the only person on the lawn who looks even slightly amused, jogs over and claps Kangmin on the shoulder. "Well," he says, "that went about as well as I expected." "Kangwoo," Kangmin exhales. "Not now." "I'm serious, that's basically a warm welcome by his standards." Kangwoo glances at Jasmine, and his smile is the first one she's gotten since landing. "Hi, I'm the brother who isn't currently being threatened with disinheritance. You must be Jasmine." "I must be," Jasmine says, because she genuinely doesn't know what else to say. "He does this to everyone," Kangwoo says. "He just usually does it in private." "Why didn't he do it in private this time?" Kangwoo's smile doesn't change, but something behind his eyes does. "Because this isn't a normal week." Before she can ask what that means, a woman appears from the side of the compound, small, silver-haired, moving slower than everyone else but somehow commanding more space because of it. She takes Jasmine's hands in both of hers before anyone can stop her. "You must be exhausted," the woman says. "Helicopters are loud and rude, and I've never liked them. I'm Kangmin's grandmother." "Don't worry about what just happened. My husband performs for an audience. He'll calm down by dinner." "Grandmother." Kangmin's voice has softened entirely, the tightness gone. "This is Jasmine. I know exactly who she is. I've heard your voice on the phone for 4 months. It's nice to finally see the face that goes with it." It's the first kind thing anyone has said since the helicopter landed, and Jasmine feels her shoulders drop half an inch. She doesn't notice Aunt Miran watching the exchange from the edge of the lawn, already pulling her phone from her pocket, already typing. If you're already invested in whether Jasmine survives this family, trust me, this is the calm part. Go ahead and hit subscribe now, because it gets a lot less calm from here. The walk to the main house takes longer than it should, mostly because every few yards someone else materializes to be introduced, assessed, and filed away. Executives. A family lawyer who shakes Jasmine's hand exactly once and doesn't smile. A woman introduced only as Director Yoon, who looks at Jasmine the way a jeweler looks at a stone she's deciding whether to buy. Yoon Jae-hai, the woman says, extending a hand cool enough that Jasmine notices even in the island heat. Kang-min and I have known each other since university. Our families do a great deal of business together. Nice to meet you, Jasmine says, because it's the only response built for this exact loaded sentence. I'm sure it is. Jae-hai's smile doesn't reach anywhere near her eyes. Kang-min, your grandfather wants you in the study before dinner. Alone. Kang-min glances at Jasmine. I'll be quick. I'll go with her, Kang-woo offers before Jasmine can answer. Someone has to show her where the bodies are buried, figuratively, mostly figuratively. Kang-min doesn't laugh at the joke the way Jasmine expects him to. He just nods once, presses a kiss to her temple, and walks toward the main residence with the kind of posture she's never seen on him before, like he's bracing for something before he's even reached the door. Kang-woo waits until he's out of earshot before he speaks again. How much has he told you? About what? About why this week, specifically, is the worst possible week for him to bring a girlfriend home. Jasmine feels something cold settle low in her stomach. He told me his grandfather likes things a certain way. He didn't mention a worst possible week. Kang-woo glances toward the main house, then lowers his voice. My grandfather's stepping back from the company, like the strip soon, and there isn't an obvious answer for who takes over. My father's not interested. My uncle's dead. That leaves my cousin, my brother, and a board full of people who'd very much like it to be neither of them. And me showing up makes Kang-min look like a man with priorities that aren't the company, which is exactly the kind of thing certain people in this family have been waiting for an excuse to say out loud. Kang-woo's smile flickers into something more serious. I like you already, for what it's worth. I just want you to understand the water you waded into. Jasmine looks back at the main house, where Kang-min disappeared, and tries to remember the last time anything about loving him had felt simple. She comes up empty. It had always been complicated underneath. She just assumed the complication was distance, time zones, his work trips. Not this. Not a corporate war with her standing in the middle of the battlefield without having read a single page of the rules. Show me the bodies, she says, figuratively. Kang-woo laughs, actually laughs, and for the first time since the helicopter touched down, Jasmine feels like she might survive the week after all. The estate walk that follows is the strangest orientation she's ever received. Not because Kang-woo isn't trying, he is, in his easy, sideways way, but because the compound keeps revealing itself in ways that have no obvious civilian equivalent. A private helicopter terminal behind the main house. A marina longer than some hotel lobbies she's worked in. Gardens that look like someone decided what a garden should be and then hired 100 people to make sure it never disagreed with that decision. How big is this island? Jasmine asks. Big enough that you can avoid someone for 3 days if you're motivated, Kang-woo says, which is a feature, not a flaw, depending on the week. And this week everyone is motivated to find everyone else, he says, which is going to make the avoiding considerably harder. Try not to get cornered in a garden room alone. Miran thinks best in small enclosed spaces. It doesn't sound like a joke, entirely, and Jasmine files it away next to everything else she's been quietly filing since the helicopter touched down. The way the staff adjusted their paths to avoid the chairman without it looking deliberate. The way Yoon Jae-hai tracked Kang-min's position across every room they'd been in together. The way the family lawyer had appeared from nowhere during introductions, shook her hand, and then simply documented her face. She'd felt it, like being catalogued. She is not the first woman who has been brought to this island. She might be the first one who noticed what was being counted. With a ceiling tall enough to need its own weather system, at a table long enough that conversations at one end can't be heard at the other, which Jasmine suspects is the entire point. She's seated between Kang-min and Kang-woo, which she's grateful for, because it puts the chairman 4 seats away and Aunt Miran directly across, smiling at her like they're old friends instead of 2 women who met an hour ago under hostile conditions. Jasmine, Miran says her name like she's trying it out. Tell us what you do for work. I manage a restaurant, front of house. A pause settles over the nearest few seats, brief but unmistakable. Miran's smile doesn't falter, but it sharpens. How charming, she says. A service industry, you must be very good with people. I am actually, Jasmine says, holding the woman's gaze. It's mostly about reading a room, knowing who's about to cause a problem before they do. Kangwoo chokes slightly on his water. Kangmin's hand finds Jasmine's under the table and squeezes once, which she reads as either a warning or applause, possibly both. The chairman, 4 seats down, doesn't look up from his plate, but Jasmine notices he's stopped eating. The succession announcement is in 9 days, Miran says, addressing the table now, though her eyes stay on Jasmine a beat longer than necessary. It seems important that everyone understands what's at stake this week. We have investors arriving, political guests. The board will be watching every photograph that comes out of this island. She finally turns to Kangmin. It would be unfortunate if the story they saw wasn't about leadership. The story is whatever I make it, Kangmin says, voice level, though Jasmine can feel the tension running up his arm where their hands are still linked. Is it? Miran's smile widens by a degree. I suppose we'll find out. Beside the chairman, the family lawyer clears his throat. If I may. The board has expressed interest in understanding the optics of this week before the announcement. It would help everyone's planning if certain personal matters were clarified in advance. There's nothing to clarify, Kangmin says. I'm with Jasmine. That's not a personal matter pending board approval. Everything is a board matter the week before a succession vote, the lawyer says, not unkindly, just precisely, the way Jasmine imagines he says everything. I'm not suggesting this out of malice. I'm suggesting it because investors will ask, and it's better the family has an answer ready than improvises one in front of cameras. Then the answer is simple, grandmother says, before anyone else can fill the silence. Kangmin loves someone who has integrity. If that becomes a liability for this company, the problem isn't the woman, it's the company. The lawyer inclines his head slightly and returns to his plate without another word outmatched, for now, by an 80-year-old woman who clearly doesn't lose arguments at this table often. Miran's smile thins by exactly 1 degree. Grandmother leans close to Jasmine's ear. Don't let her see it land, she murmurs. That's all she's fishing for. Jasmine takes a breath, picks her fork back up, and finishes her food like nothing happened. While down the table, Miran turns her attention to Yoon Jae-hai and begins a quiet conversation Jasmine can't hear but absolutely feels the shape of. After dinner, walking back along the lit garden path toward the guest villa, Jasmine finally lets the question out. What's 9 days from now? Kangmin stops walking. Behind him, the ocean is the only thing making noise. My grandfather is nomming his successor. In front of the board, the investors, half the government people who matter to this company. It was supposed to be a formality. Now it isn't. Why isn't it? Because for the first time, he hasn't told anyone who it's going to be. My aunt thinks it should go through her side. My cousin thinks it's his by default. The board wants someone who photographs well in a boardroom and doesn't have a girlfriend who works a restaurant floor. And you. I never wanted it, he says, and for the first time since they landed, his voice sounds tired instead of careful. But if I don't take it, it goes to someone who'll use it exactly the way my aunt wants. And I don't think that ends well for anyone who isn't her. Jasmine studies him for a moment, the exhaustion under the careful posture, the weight he's been carrying long before she got here. You should have told me all this before I got on the helicopter. I know. I would have come anyway. That gets the first real smile she's seen from him since the lawn. I know that too. That's the only reason I let myself bring you. Down the path behind them, unseen in the dark, Miran stands at her villa's window, watching the 2 shapes move toward the guest house, her phone already lit up in her hand, a message already half-typed to someone whose name doesn't appear anywhere on the family's guest list. The next morning, Jasmine wakes early and decides the smartest thing she can do on an island full of people who already think she's a liability is to make herself useful instead of decorative. She finds her way to the kitchen pavilion before anyone's called her there, offers to help plate something, and ends up in a 20-minute conversation with the head chef about knife technique that leaves both of them laughing. It's Kangwoo who finds her there, eyebrows raised. You're making friends with the staff. The staff run this island better than the family does, Jasmine says. Seemed worth knowing them. You're going to be dangerous here. He holds the door open for her. Come on. Grandmother wants you, said it's important. Grandmother is waiting in a sunroom at the edge of the family wing, a tea service already laid out, and when Jasmine sits across from her, the older woman studies her for a long moment before speaking. I want to tell you something about this family, she says, and I want you to actually listen instead of just being polite, which is what you've been doing very well for 16 hours. Okay, Jasmine says. This family confuses obedience for loyalty and money for love, my husband included, especially my husband. Grandmother pours tea for both of them without asking. Miran was raised believing that whoever controls the most is right by default. She has spent 30 years collecting leverage instead of relationships, and right now, she is terrified that Kang Min might actually win this fairly, because if love and decency are enough to take the company, then everything she's built her life on for 3 decades was a waste. That sounds like a reason for her to come after me. It is exactly the reason she's already started. Grandmother's expression doesn't change, but her voice drops a register. I don't know what she's planning yet. I only know she's planning something, because she always is, and because last night she made 3 phone calls after midnight to a number that isn't in the family directory. Jasmine sets her teacup down carefully. How do you know that? Because I've outlived 4 versions of this exact crisis, Grandmother says, and you learn to watch the phones instead of the faces. She reaches across the table and takes Jasmine's hand, the gesture surprisingly firm for someone so small. I like you. I liked you before you landed, from the way Kang Min talked about you on the phone where he thought I couldn't hear. I'm asking you to be careful, not because you're weak, but because the people circling you are not. Through the sunroom's open doorway, far across the garden, Jasmine catches a flash of cream-colored fabric disappearing around a hedge, Miran, moving with purpose toward the private marina, phone already pressed to her ear. That night, once the dinner plates are cleared and the garden lamps have dimmed, Kang Min finds her on the terrace and doesn't ask permission before sitting down beside her. I want to show you something, he says. If you're not too tired to walk. She isn't. They follow a path she hasn't seen before, away from the main compound, past the chapel and the marina, until the ground rises into rock and the island's lighthouse appears against the dark sky, its beams sweeping slow circles over black water. This was the only place on the island my grandfather never controlled, Kang Min says, climbing the narrow stairs ahead of her. It's automated now, runs itself. As a kid, that felt like the most rebellious thing in the world, somewhere that didn't answer to him. At the top, the wind is sharper, the view wide enough that the compound's lights look small and manageable from up here. You've been carrying something since we landed, Jasmine says. Not just the succession, something older. Kang Min is quiet for a long moment, hands braced on the railing. My father wanted out of this family his entire life and never managed it. He spent 30 years resenting a company he never had the courage to actually leave. I told myself I'd be different, that I'd either take it on my own terms or walk away clean. I just never expected the choosing to happen this fast. You don't have to protect me from your family, Jasmine says. I'm not made of glass. I know that. I think that's actually what scares me. He looks at her now, fully, the careful diplomat gone. Everyone in my life either wants something from me or is afraid of me. You're the first person who's just stayed. And the idea that this week might be the thing that takes you away. It isn't going to, Jasmine says, and means it more than she's meant anything all week. I didn't fly out here expecting an easy summer. I flew out here because I love you, and love that only survives the easy parts isn't really love. It's just convenience with good lighting. He laughs, actually laughs, the sound rough and surprised, like he forgot he was capable of it under this much pressure. My grandmother would like that line. Steal it. Tell her I said it first. He pulls her in then, the wind loud enough around them that the rest of the island disappears entirely, and for the first time since the helicopter touched down, the fear that's been sitting in Jasmine's chest since the lawn finally, quietly, loosens its grip. It takes 3 more days for the first real crack to show, and when it does, Jasmine is the one who finds it, mostly by accident, partly because she's started doing exactly what Kang-woo warned her she'd be good at, paying attention. She's cutting through the family's private office wing on her way back from the kitchen, taking a shortcut Kang-woo showed her, when she hears Miran's voice through a half-open door, low and sharp in a way dinner table Miran never sounds. The documents need to be finalized before the announcement, not after. If the board sees them after the vote, it doesn't matter what they say. A pause. No, he doesn't know. None of them know. That's the entire point of doing it this way. Jasmine freezes mid-step. Through the gap in the door, she can see Miran standing over a desk covered in folders, a man in an unfamiliar suit, not staff, not family, someone Jasmine has never seen at the table nodding along. The investors signed based on projections I gave them, Miran continues. If those numbers don't match what's filed with the board next week, that's not my problem. That's a timing issue we solve after the succession is locked. Jasmine doesn't move, doesn't breathe almost. She doesn't fully understand what's being described, but she understands enough, numbers that don't match, documents finalized before anyone official sees them, an outsider in a room he was never supposed to be in. A floorboard creaks behind her. She turns, heart slamming, and finds Kangwoo standing a few feet back, finger pressed to his lips, already pulling her away from the door by the elbow. They don't speak until they're 3 corridors away, out on the side terrace, wind loud enough to cover their voices. "You heard that," Jasmine says. It isn't a question. Enough of it. Kangwoo's easy charm is gone entirely, replaced by something focused and cold that makes him look, for the first time, like he actually belongs to this family. That man in there isn't on any guest list I've seen. She brought him onto a private island without clearing it, which means whatever they're doing, she didn't want anyone with real authority knowing about it. What do? We don't do anything yet. If we go to my grandfather with half a conversation and no proof, she spins it into us attacking her out of jealousy over the succession, and suddenly you're the outsider trying to sabotage the family business. We need more than what we just heard. Jasmine feels the cold settle deeper in her stomach. She's going to come after me before we get more, isn't she? Kangwoo doesn't answer right away, which is its own kind of answer. Get to Kangmin. Tell him what we heard. And Jasmine, until we know what those documents actually say, don't go anywhere on this island alone. She doesn't get the chance to find Kangmin before Miran finds her first. It happens at the pool terrace, mid-afternoon, with enough family and staff around that Jasmine doesn't immediately register it as an ambush. Miran sits down across from her with 2 drinks, sliding one over like they're old friends catching up. "I wanted to apologize," Miran says. "For dinner. I was harsh." Succession. Weeks make all of us harsher than we mean to be. "It's fine," Jasmine says carefully, watching the woman's face for whatever's underneath the apology. "I also wanted to give you something." Miran slides a folded photograph across the table, and Jasmine's stomach drops before she's even unfolded it. It's a picture of her, taken from a distance, standing at the edge of the marina the night before, talking to one of the boat staff. Innocuous, completely ordinary. Except for the angle, the zoom, the fact that someone was watching her closely enough to capture it at all. "I have people who manage my image," Miran says, voice pleasant, almost gentle. "They also, occasionally, manage other people's images when it's useful for the family. I'd hate for a tabloid to run a photo like this with a caption that wasn't kind. Service worker spotted flirting with crew while billionaire boyfriend is in succession meetings." You understand how these stories get written with the wrong framing. "There's nothing to frame," Jasmine says, voice steadier than she feels. "I was asking him where to find sunscreen." "I'm sure you were." Miran's smile doesn't move. "I'm simply saying it would be a shame for a misunderstanding like that to become a story right before the announcement. For everyone's sake, it might be wise to keep a lower profile for the rest of the week. Stay close to the villa. Let the family handle family business." It isn't a request. Jasmine understands that immediately, the way you understand whether turning before the first drop falls. "Is that a threat?" she asks. "It's hospitality," Miran says, standing, smoothing her skirt. "I'd hate for you to misunderstand that too." She walks away without touching her drink, and Jasmine sits alone at the table for a long moment, photograph still in her hand, before she finally lets herself shake. The thing is, she understands exactly what Miran just did. She's managed a restaurant for 6 years. She knows the difference between someone who has power and someone who has run out of everything except the performance of it. Miran just showed her hand, which means she's scared enough to start burning things. The photograph isn't proof of anything. It's a signal. You are being watched. You are manageable. Leave before it gets worse. Jasmine has been managed before. By landlords, by previous employers, by people who assumed that a woman without a last name carrying any weight would back down when pushed. She didn't then either. She folds the photograph carefully and puts it in her pocket. Evidence, she thinks, not a warning. This is the part where it stops being a story about a girl meeting her boyfriend's difficult family and starts being a story about whether she's going to let them push her out before she's even had the chance to fight. If you want to find out which one wins, you already know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, because the next part is where things actually break open. She finds Kangmin that evening and tells him everything. The eavesdropped conversation, the man with no place on the guest list, the photograph, the warning dressed up as hospitality. She watches something in his face shift while she talks, the careful diplomatic mask he's worn since they landed finally cracking into something closer to fury. "She photographed you," he says, voice flat, "on my family's island like you're a liability to be managed." "She's already managing you," Jasmine says. "I'm just collateral in a bigger fight." She takes his hand before he can respond. "Your brother and I heard the same conversation. There's something in those documents that could actually matter, something bigger than threatening me. But if we go to your grandfather with half a story, she buries us. We need proof." Kang-woo arrives a few minutes later and lays out the plan without ceremony. "There's an archive room," he says. "Old company filings, records nobody's digitized because nobody thought they needed to. If she's manufacturing numbers for outside investors, there's a real version somewhere that doesn't match, and she'd never risk keeping anything incriminating on a server anyone could access. Paper, locked paper, that's where I'd hide it." "You know where it is," Kang-min says. "I know where it is. I don't know the combination to the door, which hasn't been changed since before I was born, and which grandfather has never once shared with anyone under the age of 50. Kang-woo grimaces. "There's exactly one person on this island who might have it. They all arrive at the same name at the same time." Grandmother doesn't ask many questions when they explain it to her the next morning, which somehow makes the moment feel heavier, not lighter, like she's been waiting for this conversation for longer than any of them realize. "I've known for 2 years that something wasn't right with the Eastern investor accounts," she says, setting down her tea with a steadiness that doesn't quite match the words. "I never had proof. I had a feeling, and feelings don't move boardrooms." She studies the three of them, Kang-min, Kang-woo, Jasmine, like she's deciding something. "If I give you that combination and you're wrong, you will have broken into a locked family archive based on a guess, and Miran will use that to bury all 3 of you before the week is over." "And if we're right?" Jasmine asks. "If you're right," grandmother says slowly, "then I finally have a reason to do something I should have done years ago." She writes the combination on a slip of paper instead of saying it aloud, slides it across the table, and folds her hands like the matter is closed. "Go tonight, after the political reception. Everyone important will be too occupied with each other to notice 3 people missing for 20 minutes. The reception that evening is the largest gathering yet. Government officials in dark suits, investors speaking in clipped, efficient tones, photographers stationed at every entrance capturing the kind of images that end up in business magazines 6 months later. Jasmine stands at Kang-min's side through most of it, smiling at people whose names she's forgotten the second she's told them, watching Miran work the room like a conductor, watching Yoon Jae-hai watch Kang-min like she's still doing math on a future that hasn't been decided yet. Miran finds her an hour in, sliding into the circle of investors Jasmine's currently standing in with Kang-min, smile bright enough to look like generosity from a distance. "Everyone, this is the woman my nephew brought home this week," Miran says, voice pitched for the whole circle to hear. "Jasmine, why don't you tell our guests what drew you to this family? I'm sure they'd love your perspective on what we're building here." It's a trap dressed as an invitation, and Jasmine understands that in the half-second it takes 6 unfamiliar faces to turn toward her. "Honestly," Jasmine says, "I didn't come here for what you're building. I came here for the man building it." A small, easy laugh moves through part of the circle. "But since you're asking, what struck me most this week is how many people in this family confuse control with leadership. They're not the same thing. Control is making sure no one disagrees with you. Leadership is earning agreement from people who didn't have to give it." One of the investors, an older man with a faint smile he hasn't fully committed to, raises his glass slightly. "That's a sharper read on this family than most consultants I've paid for." "I get good tips for it," Jasmine says, and the laugh that follows is real, loud enough that Miran's smile finally falters. "How refreshing," Miran says, recovering fast. "A philosophy degree from the service industry." "No degree," Jasmine says easily. "Just experience reading rooms full of people who think they're the only ones paying attention." The investor laughs again, openly, and claps Kang-min on the shoulder like he's just been handed good news. "Keep this one around," he says, and the conversation moves on, leaving Miran at the edge of a circle she walked into expecting to win. The look she gives Jasmine before turning away, brief, cold, recalculating, isn't a retreat, it's a postponement. At 9:15, Kang-woo catches Jasmine's eye across the hall and tilts his head, almost imperceptibly, toward the garden doors. She finds an excuse, fresh air, a headache, nothing dramatic, and slips out through the side terrace where Kang Min meets her a minute later, having made his own quiet exit. Kang Woo is already waiting by the garden wall, small flashlight in hand. "We have maybe 20 minutes before anyone notices all three of us gone," he says. "Let's not waste them." They move along the tree line instead of the lit path, Kang Woo leading with the kind of familiarity that comes from a childhood spent finding every place on this island a child wasn't supposed to be. Halfway across the lawn, he stops them with a flat hand. A security guard's flashlight beam sweeps slow across the grass 30 yards ahead, his radio crackling faintly at his hip. "He does this loop every 40 minutes, Kang Woo whispers. We wait. They crouch in the shadow of a hedge long enough that Jasmine's knees start to ache, and her pulse refuses to slow down. The beam swings past them once, close enough that she stops breathing entirely, and then continues toward the marina without pausing. "Now," Kang Woo breathes, and they move. The archive sits in a low stone building behind the family chapel, the kind of structure that looks ornamental until you notice the modern lock bolted into 80-year-old wood. Kang Min's hands aren't quite steady as he enters the combination, and for one terrible second nothing happens, and then the lock clicks, and the door swings open into a room that smells like old paper and sealed air. Rows of filing boxes, decades of them, labeled in handwriting that gets progressively more modern as the dates climb toward the present. Kang Woo moves fast, scanning labels with the flashlight, while Jasmine and Kang Min split off down another row. It's Jasmine who finds it, not because she knows what she's looking for, but because one box near the back has a layer of dust noticeably thinner than the boxes around it. Recently handled, recently returned. Inside, ledgers. Real ones, not the polished printouts she's seen circulating at the reception, but handwritten entries, dates spanning the last 18 months, numbers that, even to someone who doesn't speak finance fluently, clearly don't match the figures she overheard Miran quoting through that office door days earlier. What she notices first isn't the numbers themselves. It's the handwriting. Careful, deliberate, the kind of precision someone uses when they want a record to exist but don't want it found. Every entry cross-referenced against a date. Every date a time when the family was gathered somewhere visible. A dinner, a board meeting, a reception. Alibis built into an accounting ledger layers deep. "Kang Min!" Her voice comes out smaller than she means it to. "I think this is it." He crosses the room fast, takes the ledger from her hands, and goes very still as he reads. Kang Woo arrives a second later, peering over his shoulder, and the silence that follows is worse than any shout could have been. "She's been running 2 sets of numbers," Kang Min says finally. "The real performance in here, and whatever she's been showing outside investors." He flips a page, jaw tightening. "This isn't an accounting error. This is structured, deliberate." "Why fake numbers to investors she's trying to keep happy?" Jasmine asks. "Because the real numbers don't support the succession plan she wants," Kang Woo says slowly, putting it together out loud. "If the company's actually underperforming in the sectors she's betting on, no serious board member backs her candidate. So she inflates the numbers for the outside investors, locks in their support before anyone sees the real figures, and by the time the truth comes out, the vote's already happened," Kang Min finishes. "She doesn't need the truth to hold up. She just needs it to hold up long enough." A sound outside the door, footsteps on gravel, closer than any of them expected. Kang Woo kills the flashlight instantly, and the three of them freeze in the sudden dark, the ledger pressed flat against Kang Min's chest. The footsteps pause directly outside the door, then move on. Nobody speaks until they've counted to 60 in their heads. "We need to photograph everything," Kang Min whispers finally, voice rough with adrenaline. "Tonight, before anyone realizes this box has been touched twice in 1 week." If you've ever wondered what it actually feels like to hold proof that could blow apart a multi-billion-dollar family, keep watching. Because what happens when they walk back into that reception is not what any of them expect. They make it back with 4 minutes to spare, photographs of the ledger pages safely backed up in 2 separate places, and Jasmine spends the rest of the evening smiling at strangers while her hands shake faintly at her sides. It's Yoon Jae-hai who corners her near the dessert table, drink in hand, voice pitched for privacy. "You disappeared for a while," Jae-hai says, not quite a question. "Headache, fresh air helped." Jae-hai studies her for a beat too long. "You should know Miran isn't someone who waits to see how things play out. She acts first, always has." A pause, something almost like reluctant honesty crossing her face. I'm not saying this because I like you. I don't particularly. I'm saying it because I'd rather win this fairly, and Miran winning isn't fair to anyone, including me. It's the strangest alliance offer Jasmine's ever received, delivered with zero warmth and total sincerity. And before she can respond, Jai-hai is already walking away. She doesn't have long to wonder what to do with it. Across the hall, Miran has just noticed something that makes her face go very still. Grandmother, deep in conversation with the chairman, both of them glancing periodically toward the archive building visible through the garden windows. Miran's hand tightens around her glass. She doesn't know what they know yet, but she knows enough to be afraid of finding out. The chairman summons all of them, Kang-min, Jasmine, Kang-woo, grandmother, and Miran, to the family council chamber the next morning, 2 days before the scheduled announcement, his expression unreadable in the way Jasmine has learned means something serious is coming. I want to know, he says without preamble, why my archive room shows signs of being accessed twice in 1 week, after going untouched for 3 years. Nobody answers immediately. Miran's posture is perfectly composed, but Jasmine notices her knuckles have gone pale where her hands rest on the table. We accessed it, Kang-min says finally, with grandmother's permission. For what purpose? Kang-min sets the folder of printed photographs on the table without further preamble. Because we had reason to believe the figures being presented to outside investors didn't match the company's actual performance. We found ledgers confirming it. The silence that follows has weight to it, the kind that presses against the walls of a room. That's absurd, Miran says, voice tight but controlled. Those records are decades of archived material. Anyone could misread context. The dates are from the last 18 months, Kang-woo says quietly. There's no misreading that. The chairman opens the folder himself, takes his time turning through the photographed pages, his expression giving away nothing until he reaches the 3rd page, where he stops entirely. This is your handwriting, he says, looking up at his daughter for the first time since the meeting started. Father, this is your handwriting on figures that do not match what was filed with the Eastern Investment Group 3 months ago. His voice doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. Explain it to me, now, in this room. What follows is the longest silence Jasmine has experienced in her life, Miran's composure cracking by degrees, the careful mask sliding until what's left underneath is something closer to panic than power. I was protecting the family's position, she finally says. The real numbers would have spooked the investors before we'd secured their backing for the succession. I was going to correct the filings once the vote was finalized. It was always temporary. You falsified financial records to manipulate a succession vote, the chairman says, each word landing like something physical, and you call it temporary. I did it for this family, Miran says, and for the first time her voice cracks. Everything I've ever done has been for this family's position, this family's power, while you spent decades deciding which of your grandsons deserved it more than the daughter who actually stayed. She doesn't stop there. She can't seem to stop. I built half of what this company became in the last decade, and the only thing anyone in this family has ever asked me is when I'm going to step aside so one of you can have it handed to you. Nobody is handing me anything, Kang-min says quietly. Least of all this week. No, this week you're earning it by falling in love with a waitress in front of investors. How fortunate for you that integrity photographs so well. That's enough, grandmother says, and though her voice doesn't rise either, something in it cuts through the room more sharply than either of the louder voices managed. You built things, Miran. I have never denied that. But you built them on a foundation you were too afraid to test honestly, and now you're angry that someone else tested hers and won. Miran's mouth opens, then closes. For the first time since Jasmine arrived on this island, the older woman looks less like a threat and more like someone who has simply run out of moves she's confident in. The chairman closes the folder slowly, and when he speaks again, his voice has lost some of its iron. You will resign your position on the board today, and you will personally correct every filing you altered under council's supervision before this family's name is attached to a single additional lie. Father, this is not a negotiation, Miran. His eyes move, finally, to Jasmine, standing quietly at the edge of the room where she's tried to make herself invisible through the entire exchange. And it is not the outsider's fault that this happened. I want that understood by everyone in this room. The family lawyer, seated at the far end of the table, finally speaks. Chairman, for the board's protection, I'd recommend documenting this conversation formally. Given what's about to follow. It's the only thing he says in the entire meeting, and somehow it's enough to make the moment feel permanent instead of just personal. Miran's eyes find Jasmine across the table, and for a moment, the hatred there is so pure it's almost impressive. Then she stands, smooths her jacket with hands that are visibly shaking, and walks out without another word, the door closing behind her with a softness that somehow lands harder than a slam would have. The room stays quiet for a beat that nobody seems willing to break first. The chairman sits with his hands flat on the table, the folder of printed photographs still open in front of him, and for the first time all week, Jasmine sees something underneath the control, not just a patriarch managing a dynasty, but an old man who just watched his daughter walk out of a room as a stranger. Whatever he feels about that, he doesn't share it. He straightens, closes the folder. The board will be notified through counsel, he says. Nobody in this room speaks to outside investors until that process is completed. Understood? Everyone nods. Grandmother is already rising, one hand pressed lightly to Kang Min's shoulder as she passes him, the gesture lasting exactly 1 second and saying everything she'd need 3 sentences to explain. Kang-woo catches Jasmine's eye from across the table and gives her the smallest nod, the kind that means, we did it, and also, I can't believe we actually did it, and also, let's get out of this room before anyone starts asking follow-up questions. Past strangely quiet, the island settling into something like exhaustion after the storm. Miran doesn't appear at meals. Yoon Jae-hai, when Jasmine passes her on a garden path, gives her a small nod that might be the closest thing to respect the woman is capable of showing. In the kitchen pavilion, the head chef sets a small plate in front of Jasmine without being asked, a dessert not on any guest menu, the kind made only for family. You held your own this week, he says simply. Most people who marry into money around here forget the staff exist by day 3. You learned half our names by day 1. It's the smallest compliment she's received all week, delivered by someone with no stake in the succession fight at all, and somehow it lands harder than anything said in the council chamber. It's grandmother who finds Jasmine the evening before the announcement, sitting alone on the terrace, watching the last of the sunset bleed out over the water. You did something this family hasn't managed to do in 30 years, grandmother says, settling into the chair beside her. I just told the truth about a conversation I overheard, Jasmine says. You told the truth in a family that has spent 3 decades rewarding people for not doing that. Grandmother's hand finds hers, the same firm grip from the sunroom days earlier. My husband will never say this to you directly, because saying things directly isn't something he's capable of, so I'll say it instead. You earned a place in this family this week, not because of who you're dating. Because of who you are when no one tells you it's safe to be honest. Jasmine feels something in her chest loosen that's been tight since the helicopter touched down. I was terrified the entire time. Everyone worth anything is, grandmother says. The difference is whether you let it stop you. Down the path, Kang Min appears, having clearly been looking for her. He sits on her other side, close enough that his shoulder presses against hers. My grandfather's been packing his study for an hour. I think he's actually nervous about tomorrow. What's he nervous about? He's the one making the announcement. He's nervous about admitting he was wrong out loud, in front of people who have spent 30 years watching him never do that. He takes her hand. Whatever he says tomorrow, I'd have chosen you regardless. The company was never going to be worth more to me than this. I know, Jasmine says. I think I've known since the lighthouse. Grandmother watches the two of them for a moment, something soft moving across her face that she doesn't bother hiding. I'll leave you both to it, she says, rising slowly. Try not to stay out here so long you're useless for tomorrow. It's a big day. Define useless, Kang Min calls after her, and grandmother's laugh drifts back down the path long after she's out of sight. She does belong here, not because anyone granted her permission. Because she stood in the middle of a fight that wasn't hers, and refused to disappear when it would have been easier. The succession ceremony takes place the following afternoon, the hall filled with the same investors, board members, and political guests from the reception days earlier, none of them aware of exactly how close the entire event came to being built on a lie. The chairman stands at the front of the hall, the weight of decades visible in how carefully he chooses his next words. 3 days ago, he says, I discovered that figures presented to several of you were manipulated to secure outcomes that the company's true performance did not support. That manipulation has been corrected. The individual responsible has resigned from this company's leadership, effective immediately. A ripple moves through the crowd. Near the front, the investor who'd laughed with Jasmine at the reception mutters something approving to the man beside him. The kind of reaction that tells the chairman his gamble on honesty is holding the room instead of losing it. I am telling you this, the chairman continues, because this family's name has survived for 3 generations on the belief that our word means something. I would rather lose a quarter of investors today than lose that. He lets the silence settle. As for succession, his eyes move across the hall, landing finally on his grandson, standing near the front beside Jasmine, Kangwoo just behind them. I had intended to announce a successor chosen for strength, for image, for the qualities I believed this company needed to project. I have spent this week watching a young woman who is not even part of this family by blood show more integrity under pressure than most people in this room have shown in a lifetime of comfort. And I have watched my grandson choose her, repeatedly, even when choosing her cost him standing in this family's eyes. Jasmine feels Kangmin's hand find hers, gripping tight. I am naming Seo Kangmin as my successor, the chairman says, not despite the woman beside him, because of the man loving her honestly has made him become. The hall erupts into applause that Jasmine barely hears over the sound of her own heartbeat, Kangmin turning to her with an expression she's never seen on him before, something unguarded, something that looks, finally, like relief instead of duty. You did this, he murmurs against her hair. We did this, she says, all of us. She means it. She means grandmother, who watched phones instead of faces for years and waited for the right moment. She means Kangwoo, who grew up memorizing the floor plan of a building no one was supposed to enter. She means herself, the woman who got on a helicopter without knowing what she was walking into, and stayed anyway when walking out would have been easier. The chairman is still speaking, saying something about new chapters and renewed commitments, and investors are already recalibrating around the room, rearranging their relationships to a future that looks different than the one they arrived expecting. Jasmine doesn't hear most of it. She's watching grandmother across the hall instead, small, silver-haired, entirely still in a room that's erupted into noise, and thinking that sometimes the most powerful person in a room is the one who is patient enough to already know how it ended. With the closest thing to a triumphant smile Jasmine has seen from her all week, while at the very back, near the doors, Yoon Jae-hai claps along with everyone else, expression unreadable, already moving on to whatever comes next for her. Kangwoo finds Jasmine in the crush of congratulations a few minutes later, grinning in a way that finally looks unguarded instead of performed. For what it's worth, I always wanted it to be him. I just didn't think it'd take a forged ledger and a girlfriend with better instincts than our entire board to get there. Glad I could help, Jasmine says. You did more than help. You're the reason the company gets to start over instead of just changing hands. He glances toward Jae-hai, currently in quiet conversation with 2 investors near the doors. She's going to be insufferable about being right about Miran, by the way. Fair warning. I think I can live with that. Good, Kangwoo says, because something tells me you're going to be around for a while. That night, the family gathers for a dinner that feels nothing like the one on Jasmine's first evening. No cold appraisal down the table. No quiet warnings disguised as hospitality. Just the easy noise of people who have survived something together. Even the chairman, 3 glasses of wine into a celebration he clearly didn't expect to be having, looks at Jasmine across the table with something that might, generously, be called warmth. I owe you an apology, he says, when the conversation lulls. The lawn, for the entire first day. You don't, Jasmine says. You were protecting your family. I was protecting my idea of my family, he corrects, which is not the same thing and which I'm only now old enough to understand. He raises his glass slightly. Welcome to this one, the real one. Later, walking the same garden path she walked in fear just days earlier, Kangmin stops her beneath the same dark sky, the same sound of ocean against shoreline, except now none of it feels uncertain. I have something to ask you, he says, and I want you to know I already asked my grandfather's permission, which I'm aware is old-fashioned, but apparently I come from old-fashioned people. Jasmine's breath catches before he's even reached into his pocket. I didn't bring you here to survive my family, he says, kneeling slightly, ring box opening in his palm. I brought you here because I wanted them to see what I already knew, that you're the best thing that's ever walked into my life, and I don't want to spend another day pretending that isn't true to make anyone else comfortable. Behind them, unseen, grandmother watches from the terrace with the kind of satisfaction that comes from waiting decades for exactly this kind of ending, while somewhere across the island, Miran packs the last of her belongings into a car bound for the airstrip, the consequences of 1 week finally, completely real. Jasmine says yes before he's even finished the question, laughing through it the way you do when something feels too good to receive calmly. And for the first time since the helicopter touched down on that lawn, the island feels like exactly what it should have been from the beginning, not a battlefield, but a home she fought honestly to belong in. If this story made you believe love can survive even the most powerful families thrown against it, subscribe for more stories just like this one, because this is far from the last battle worth watching unfold.